If you've been looking for ways to use up all of those fabric scraps that you've been collecting, then stick around. I'm gonna share all of my tips and tricks to make these cute flower pots. You want to start with some fabric scraps, and as an option you can buy wood cutouts and then acrylic paint and dowels to go with those cutouts. And of course we'll want a terracotta flower pot. I'm using a 4-inch pot. I also highly recommend sealing your pots first. I always use this clay pot sealer, and I can tell you it really makes a huge difference. Just to give you an idea of what happens if you don't seal it, you can see how this pot got very stained. If you're planning to use saucers, I would also recommend sealing those. While our pots are drying, we can turn to painting our little wood cutouts. I'm using a paint that is suitable for outdoors or indoors, and I chose just a variety of colors to coordinate with my fabric. Once the pots are dry, you can go ahead and trace the shape onto the backside of your fabric. I'm using a fabric pen here that won't show up, and you'll notice I'm leaving a little bit of an allowance on the top and bottom. You don't want to trace it to the exact measurement of your pot because we're going to be folding over some of the edges. Then we just need to cut out our shape and fit it to our pot. It's always good before you move any further to just go ahead and make sure that your fabric is going to fit your pot. I will show you in a minute what happens if you make a little mistake and need to patch up a little bald spot. But for now, this is looking good, so I'm going to go ahead and cut off any excess, but I'm going to leave maybe about 1/2 inch to 1 inch of overlap, just so that we won't accidentally cut it a little too short. You'll see here how much overlap I have still. You can always trim it down later, but you can't add more fabric, so make sure you leave plenty of space. Now we'll take some Mod Podge, just the regular matte formula, and start applying it directly onto the pot. I like to start in sections. I'll just begin in maybe like 1/3 of the pot or 1/4 of the pot, attach my fabric, and then I'll start working my way around in patches. Once I've made it all the way around, I can go ahead and trim off some of that excess. Then I'll take just a little bit more Mod Podge on my brush and smooth it out underneath, making sure it's almost seamless. Along the bottom, we can apply more Mod Podge and just tuck in those little extra pieces of fabric so that they fit nicely underneath. We'll do the same thing around the rim of the top and just go in sections applying Mod Podge and then folding the excess fabric over the edge. If you wanted more of a fabric overlap around the rim of the pot, you could always just trace a bigger pattern when you go to cut it. So keep that in mind as you're designing your own patterns for your flower pots. And here's a look at the finished flower pot. At least it's almost finished. We have one more step to finish it off, but before we do that, I'm gonna go ahead and make my other 2 flower pots with different but coordinating fabrics. I mentioned earlier in the video that you want to be careful when making your cuts and trimming up your fabric for your flower pots. Here's why. When I went to go ahead and apply the fabric, everything fit perfectly and I had great overlap, but when I went to trim the excess, I misjudged just a little bit. I angled it a little bit too close to the flower pot, and you can see what happened when I went to Mod Podge. There was just a tiny bit of the pot that was not covered, but not to worry if this happens to you. You can always take another little patch of fabric, line up your pattern if it has some kind of pattern repeat, and then just trim off the excess. So it's almost like putting a little band-aid on your flower pot. The good thing is with decoupage, this kind of thing is really easy to fix. You won't even be able to tell where that little patch was once we seal the bottom of the pot as well as the top of the pot. Then for the 3rd pot, I chose a really fun floral fabric that had yellow and pink and blue that coordinated really well with the others. The final step for making these decoupage flower pots is to apply a top coat of Mod Podge. For this step, you can use your regular Mod Podge matte, or you can also choose to use Mod Podge Outdoor. Just to give you a sense of the difference between the two, Mod Podge Matte has more of a matte finish and it's a thin consistency, whereas Mod Podge Outdoor has a glossy finish, but the most important thing is it's more weather resistant. Not waterproof, but more weather resistant. If you want to see what that looks like, I have this video where I made decoupage flower pots using napkins, so feel free to check that out if you want to see another example using Mod Podge Outdoor. While our pots are drying, we can turn to making our little wooden stakes. And to do that, you'll take your wooden cutouts and attach some hot glue and then place a small dowel on the back. It's good to add another little dab of hot glue on top. And my favorite hot glue sticks that I would recommend are Gorilla Glue sticks, which I'll link to below. This is just a really cute way to add an extra accent to these decorated flower pots. After waiting about 24 hours for my flower pots to completely cure and seal, I went ahead and chose a few little potted plants to place inside each one. Since these are smaller pots, you can think about what kinds of plants you would want indoors versus outdoors and which is going to be easiest for you to maintain. I chose a few plants that were part sun, part shade loving, and I just think they look adorable with these little wooden stakes. These would make a great gift, and I have plenty more flower pot inspiration for you that I'll place right here. Have fun making your own, and I'll see you next time.